Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
National Association of Resident Doctors commences a 5-day warning strike over federal government's failure to meet its demands. Drama as a presidential election petitions tribunal adjourns further pre-hearing in Peter Obi's petition to May 19th. President Muhammadu Buhari condemns attack on United States consulate convoy in Anambra State. And on the foreign scene, Prince Harry and Meghan involved in near-catastrophic car chase in New York. Good evening. This is News at 7 on Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanipekun. Doctors under the umbrella of the National Association of Resident Doctors, NARD, today commenced a 5-day warning strike about the federal government's failure to meet their demands. President of the association, Emeka Oji, had earlier announced that the warning strike will commence at 8 a.m. today, 17th of May, and end at 8 a.m. on Monday, 22nd of May. The doctors, amongst other issues, are demanding the immediate payment of the 2023 Medical Residency Training Fund, tangible steps on the upward review of the consolidated medical salary structure, and payment of all salary arrears owed its members from 2015. The association also condemned the controversial bill seeking to compel medical and dental practitioners to practice for 5 years before relocating abroad, noting that such would rather escalate the challenge of brain drain in the health sector. Earlier, the federal government warned the resident doctors against the strike action, saying there would be no payment for doctors absent from work during the period. Minister of Labor and Employment Chris Ngige urged the doctors to dialogue with the Ministry of Health rather than embark on the strike action, which he described as unknown to law. According to the minister, contrary to claims by the doctors, the federal government had paid the minimum wage adjustment arrears, adding that a 200% pay rise demanded by the doctors was not feasible at the moment. Meanwhile, in Osun State, health delivery went on without disruptions at the Osun State University Teaching Hospital, despite the nationwide warning strike declared by the National Association of Resident Doctors, NARD. During a visit to the hospital, Western Spring Television News observed that patients were being attended to while normal activities continued without disturbance. It was gathered that the resident doctors at the hospital were in discussion with the hospital management and the state government before deciding their next line of action. When approached for comments, chairman of the Association of Resident Doctors, Osun State University Teaching Hospital, Dr. John Ojo, declined comments. And staying with health, the rising cause of hypertension in Nigerian youth has been described as alarming, as a recent study indicates that more young people are developing the disease. This report by Olayinka Ali identifies the need to increase public awareness about hypertension, along with access to early detection and management.
As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark World Hypertension Day, WHD, today, recent figures suggest that more than 76.2 million Nigerians are living with hypertension, and many more are expected to develop the disease, alongside its complications of stroke, kidney damage, heart attack, erectile dysfunction, and ultimately sudden death if the condition is not properly treated. According to the Nigeria Heart Foundation, NHF, the prevalence of hypertension is about 31.1%. Indeed, 31.1% of the estimated population of 200 million Nigerians shows that 76.2 million citizens are hypertensive. Interestingly, it is indicated that more than 50% of these hypertensive Nigerians are youth between the ages of 20 and 50 years. Furthermore, the monthly care cost of hypertension is 15,964 naira, according to the Nigeria Medical Association, NMA. This means that not less than 1.22 trillion naira is is spent monthly to care for 76.2 million Nigerians living with high blood pressure and hypertension. Also, recent studies indicate that more young people are developing hypertension, which is supposed to be a disease of adulthood. A recent study in Britain revealed that young adults in generally good health make up the group most likely to be suffering from undiagnosed hypertension, which could be fatal, as untreated hypertension is said to be deadly. The shock reports showed that younger males with hypertension are particularly likely to be undiagnosed. 66% of males and 26% of females aged 16 to 24 years, and 55% of males and 44% of females aged 25 to 34 years who had hypertension were undiagnosed, compared with 17% of males and 21% of females aged 75 years and over. A medical doctor at the Uniosun Teaching Hospital, Oshogbo, Dr. Solomon Ilori, stated that the cause of this ailment among young people is on the increase, saying there are risk factors involved, which could be age, diet, smoking and intake of alcohol, excessive intake of salt, amongst others.
The incidence among young people is on the increase. You see, there are two different types of hypertension if we have to classify it. We have the one that is called primary hypertension. That one, you cannot do any investigation and know the cause of it. The cause of that one is unknown and is the commonest. There is the second type that is called the secondary hypertension. That one has a particular cause, probably due to certain damages in certain organs in the body. You see, among the youth now, the one we're having could either be primary or secondary, but there are risk factors for it. There are things that are responsible for this increase. Risk factor for it could be age. But before, it used to be very common among the older people. But unlike then, we are having the incidence on the increase among the younger people because of our diet.
Dr. Ilori further advised the general public to prevent this ailment by visiting the hospital for regular checkups.
You are having recurrent headache. You don't have fever. This recurrent headache does not subside with the use of maybe paracetamol, and it's always there. You have to go to the hospital to check. You are having this lightheadedness. You understand? You are feeling dizzy every now and then, and you don't think that it's because maybe a woman has lost blood or you are not eating well that you are feeling all these things. You have to go to the hospital to check. Somebody who has nosebleeds, just see blood in your nose, you are bleeding, you have to go to the hospital to ask. Even if it is not hypertension, something is causing it. You understand? Then you have this palpitation, you are always fearful, or you are feeling the beating of your heart every now and then. You should go to the hospital to ask them to help you check your blood pressure. Do you understand? So there are some people it will be anxiety, some people it will be sleep apnea, some people it will be poor sleep pattern. They won't be able to sleep. You understand? The moment anybody is having all these symptoms, it is always good to go to the hospital to ask them to check your blood pressure.
Meanwhile, with the outbreak of COVID-19, people living with hypertension and other comorbidities were at greater risk of severe illness and death. Fortunately, cases of COVID-19 are now in decline. Olayinka Ali, Western Spring Television News.
But to legal matters, the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal sitting in Abuja today adjourned till Friday, May 19th for continuation of pre-hearing in the petition by presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, against the President-elect Bola Tinubu. The tribunal had last week adjourned the pre-hearing session on Mr. Obi and the LP's petition till today at the instance of the petitioners. A mild drama, however, ensued today between the two camps of the Labour Party on which group should be in court, as both the LP national chairman, Julius Abure, and the party's factional chairman, Lamidi Apapa, were present. But the tribunal refused to take an appearance for the LP, as Mr. Apapa, as well as the national women's leader of the party, Dudu Manugu, tried to make an appearance for the Labour Party when the petition was called. Justice Haruna Samani noted that if two persons are making an appearance of the party, they will not be put on record. At the resumed hearing, counsel for Labour Party, Livi Uzoku, informed the court that the scheduled meeting to agree on documents to be tendered for hearing had not yielded much results, as the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) only made available 30% of the documents required from them. Counsel for INEC, Abubakar Mahmoud, however, said he was taken aback by the allegations of the counsel for the Labour Party, as they did not show up for the meeting as agreed and walked out of a rescheduled meeting. In the meantime, factional chairman of the Labour Party, Lamidi Apapa, was taken into protective custody today after he was mobbed by party supporters at the Presidential Election Petitions Court. Upon his arrival at the court, Mr. Apapa confronted Director General of Peter Obi's Presidential Campaign Council, Akin Osuntokun, about the seating arrangement. The situation was brought under control after the intervention of the Secretary of the Presidential Election Petitions Court, Josephine Ekwerube. However, things became heated again after the court adjourned the proceedings to May 19th for continuation of pre-hearing. The factional chairman had moved to address journalists when he was booed by members of the party in the camp of the LP national chairman, Julius Abure. According to reports, Mr. Apapa was dragged and pushed out of the court, and at some point, someone in the crowd removed his cap and fled. Shielded by police officers, he struggles to get to his car, but the crowd kept trailing him. Police officers within the premises eventually had to take him away for his safety. President-elect Bola Tinubu is opposing the application by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Atiku Abubakar, for a live broadcast of the proceedings of the election petition. In response to the application today, Senator Tinubu and the Vice President-elect Kashim Shettima, through the team of their lawyers led by Wole Olanipekun, said the application is an abuse of court process. They asked the Presidential Election Petitions Court to dismiss the application, arguing that the relief demanded by the applicants is not such that could be granted. Besides describing the application as frivolous, they said the court was not a rostrum, soapbox, stadium, nor theater or an arena for public entertainment. Said in the counter affidavit that the application was linked to policy formulation of the court, which is outside the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal's jurisdiction as constituted. In other news, President Muhammadu Buhari has condoled with the families of the 4 people killed by gunmen at Ogbaru local government of Anambra State. Yesterday, gunmen attacked a convoy conveying staff of the United States Consulate. Police spokesperson in Anambra, Ikenga Tochukwu, said the hoodlums murdered 2 of the police operatives and 2 staff of the consulate. In a statement today, the president's spokesperson, Garba Shehu, said President Buhari is saddened by the killings of the police officers and the staff of the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria. He said the president is equally pained about the gruesome deaths of villagers in communities in Plateau and Benue State, adding that the security agencies are committed to bringing the perpetrators to justice. Yesterday, police spokesperson in Plateau, Alfred Alabo, confirmed the killing of more than 30 persons in an attack by gunmen. Last month, gunmen invaded 2 communities in Benue, killing 14 residents and 2 soldiers. Similarly, presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, has condemned yesterday's attack on the convoy of some U.S. consulate staff members in Anambra State that claimed 4 lives. Reacting to the incident in a tweet today, Mr. Obi, a former governor of Anambra State, sympathized with the families of the deceased, the United States Embassy, and other charitable international agencies involved. He attributed the rising crime in the country to the frightening rise in poverty level and unemployment of youths, which he said is a consequence of prolonged leadership failure in the country over the years. Mr. Obi maintained that the solution remains a quick turnaround from consumption to production. He urged appropriate security agencies to ensure the perpetrators of the wicked and abominable act are fished out and made to face the full force of the law. The United States government earlier confirmed that no American citizen was affected in the attack. Intelligence policing is considered one of the most important law enforcement philosophies to effectively fight and prevent crime. It is in these lights that the Nigeria Police Force organized a training program for the officers in the Osun State Police Command. Olayinka Ali was at the training and files in this report.
Intelligence-led policing, ILP, is a system of law enforcement that was first developed in the 1990s and grew in popularity in the United States after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. This policing model is said to rely on advanced data analytics, community involvement, and collaboration with other law enforcement agencies and organizations. The Nigeria Police Force, Osun State, is holding a week-long training for officers in the state on intelligence-led policing for effective crime prevention. The training is an avenue for police officers to learn how to be proactive rather than reactive in assessing risk, which has been shown to be an effective method for preventing crime. Intelligence-led policing uses processed information as the fundamental basis for an objective decision-making framework that facilitates crime prevention, reduction, disruption, and dismantling through both strategic management and effective enforcement strategies targeting serious crimes and/or prolific offenders. The facilitator of the training, Samuel Akosu, said the training would enhance the skills of the Nigerian police in gathering intelligence to be able to curb criminal activities in the states. Participants like Israel Obadofin, Simiat Titilope, and Theophilus Adeshokon in their separate interviews attested that the training has given them insight on how to be better on their job and educates them on how to relate with members of the public, gather information which would make policing much better.
And the training is basically to build the capacity of the police so that we don't do what we do in the traditional way. They want us to use the means of technology, gather the information before we do what is expected of us, so that we build up the gap between us and the community, and so that the community can be better policed.
The program has bridged the gap between, has brought a closeness, a close gap between the Nigerian police Nigerian police officers and the members of the public, and now we will be able, unlike before, be able to discharge our duties efficiently and effortlessly efficiently.
Training on intelligence-led policing as an effective way of preventing crime, introduced by the Police Trust Fund, is a capacity building program aimed at improving the level of competence between officers and men of the Nigerian police. And so far, this is the third day, and I would say I'm very, very impressed, because a lot of us have gained a lot of new ideas and new steps in which you can take to police the community, especially in Osun State.
Today, intelligence policing is considered one of the most important law enforcement philosophies to effectively fight and prevent crime. Olayinka Ali, Western Spring Television News.
In another development, President-elect Bola Tinubu has promised to hit the ground running and unify the country upon his assumption of office come May 29th. Senator Tinubu further pledged to work to ensure continued positive relations with the United States so as to build on the gains of the partnership between both nations. The president-elect said this in a telephone conversation with the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. According to a statement by his spokesman, Tunde Rahman, the former Lagos State governor said his immediate priorities as president will be to deliver institutional reforms and development programs to deepen democratic institutions and bring help to poor and vulnerable Nigerians. Senator Tinubu also expressed his determination to strengthen Nigeria's democracy and faithfully serve the people as their president. On his part, Secretary Blinken promised to play his part in ensuring and in sustaining a cordial relationship between the two nations, saying a democratic and peaceful Nigeria is important to the United States as it is to Africa. The National Assembly has directed its clerk to transmit a bill seeking to provide for independent candidacy in presidential, governorship, national and state assemblies, as well as local government elections to President Muhammadu Buhari for assent. The National Assembly resolved to send the Constitution Alteration Bill number 58 after the Senate approved recommendations of a report. The report was presented by Deputy President of the Senate and Chair of the Ad hoc Committee on Constitution Amendment, Ovie Omagege. While presenting his report, Senator Omagege said Gombe House of Assembly had approved the Constitution Alteration Bill, making it the 24th state to approve the legislation. The bill proposes that for any citizen to contest the presidential election as an independent candidate, they must obtain the verified signatures of at least 20% of registered voters from each of the 36 states. To participate in the governorship election, the independent candidate must obtain the verified signatures of at least 20% of the registered voters from each of the LGAs of the state. The Legislative Chamber also sent a bill to the President seeking the inclusion of National Assembly presiding officers and the National Security Council. You're watching News at 7 on Western Spring Television. Still to come, Prince Harry and Meghan involved in near catastrophic car chase in New York. I'll bring you more on these when we return.
Aminatu, the legendary Queen of Zazzau, is best known to historians as Queen Amina of Zaria, an old walled town and capital of the Hausa state of Zazzau. Amina was a great warrior and the first woman to rule the ancient kingdom of Zazzau. Her 34 years as queen witnessed an unprecedented expansion of Zazzau by conquest. Queen Amina of Zaria belongs to the class of Amazons by the might of Harami and her strings of conquests. She opened Zaria to trans-border trade and was said to have initiated kola nut cultivation in the ancient kingdom. The Hausa Muslim figure was born in 1533 and died in 1610 at the age of 77 years. Folklores remember Aminatu, the Queen of Zazzau, as a brave, smart and talented leader whose giant statue now adorns the National Arts Theatre in Lagos, Nigeria, while many educational institutions bear her name. Western Spring Television identifies Queen Amina as a watershed character in history. The Korean War of 1950 to 1953 pitched North and South Korea against each other in response to intrigues by nations beyond their border with different interests from those canvassed by the two brother nations. The Korean War had all the nuances of an external conflict induced by powers that were interested in subjugating North and South Korea. Japan had leveraged on its military power to annex Korea in 1900 and imposed a military union that did not sit well with the citizens. Japan not only lost its war of conquest against Korea, all its powers were obliterated by the effect of the World War II. The end of World War II got Korea divided into two nations along 38 parallel lines by the instrumentality of the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. The Korean War lapsed into a Cold War when it stopped the prying eyes of external forces into the internal affairs of a nation now divided along its north and southern territories. Western Spring Television identifies the Korean War as a major event in history. James Ajibola Ige was a lawyer who obtained his first degree in classics from Nigeria's premier university of Ibadan. Born September 13, 1930, the orator and the polyglot spoke impeccable English, French, Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba languages. His fine diction placed him among classical orators and public speakers like Cicero, the Roman orator. This attribute earned him the prefix Cicero of Esauke. He authored Kaduna Boy, an autobiography, Detainee's Diary, Constitution, and the People, among 6 other books. Bola Ige was a colorful politician, elected governor of Oyo State in 1979 and appointed a federal minister in 1999. He was a pioneer founder of Afenifere, the Yoruba social, cultural, and political group. He invested his political sagacity to propel the group to the height of political leadership and decision-making in the southwest of Nigeria. Bola Ige was assassinated on the 23rd December 2001. His murderers are yet to be apprehended till today. Western Spring Television identifies Bola Ige as a watershed character in history.
You're welcome back. This is still news at 7 on Western Spring Television. A reminder of our headlines. National Association of Resident Doctors commences a 5-day warning strike over federal government's failure to meet its demands. Drama as a presidential election petition tribunal adjourns further pre-hearing and Peter Obi's petition to May 19th. President Muhammadu Buhari condemns attack in United States consulate convoy in Anambra State. And on the foreign scene, Prince Harry and Meghan involved in near catastrophic car chase in New York. Reports just reaching us says resident doctors of the Osun State University Teaching Hospital will not be joining the ongoing 5-day national warning strike. This was the outcome of a closed-door meeting with Governor Ademola Adeleke, where the 12 years demands of the doctors are approved by the state governor. At a meeting attended by the leadership of the medical union and management of the teaching hospital, Governor Adeleke approved with immediate effect payment of hazard allowance for clinical and non-clinical workers in the service of the state teaching hospital. The governor also approved payment of a percentage of residency training allowance for residency doctors for the same hospital on an annual basis. Reacting to the presentation by the president of the medical union, Dr. John Ojo, Governor Adeleke further directed that all other operational issues raised by the union should be looked into with immediate effect. He, however, charged the medical workers to reciprocate the gesture of the state government by rededicating themselves to excellent service delivery. A former Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Lassun Yusuf, has lamented on how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur in Nigeria. Mr. Yusuf, in an interview with Western Spring Television News, listed several challenges associated with running businesses in the country, including paying exorbitant amounts and ensuring that there is steady power in his business facilities. When asked what admonition he has for the president-elect, Bola Tinubu, towards reviving the country's economy, he replied that he has none, because according to him, the president-elect has been in charge of the administration of Lagos State for the past 24 years, and he has failed in certain areas. Several entrepreneurs in Nigeria have been lamenting the difficulty in doing business in the country amidst the economic downturn and infrastructure challenges.
Power has never been a friendly thing to Nigeria. The statistics are very, very opaque. And because I'm an engineer, I want to be careful about statistics. I don't just talk about figures. But let's start by saying that what they make us believe for more than four, 5 decades now is that Nigeria is capable of generating between 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts of power. But the transmission line can only evacuate probably between 4,000 to 5,200 megawatts. And so even from generation to transmission, you have lost almost 2,000 megawatts. And why we have not improved on the transmission system is what I don't know. So no admonition. I will only point to what they have not done, where they are coming from. And they can learn from it. It's shameful that it took the Chinese people to come and take a large chunk of shares to come and build a deep seaport. It's shameful that it took only Dangote to know that the only way I can cite one of the largest refinery in the world is in Lagos, and the people there didn't know that they were supposed to do it. Particularly when Lagos has oil now, because the Folawiyos they are doing their oil, and Lagos and Ondo share a boundary, and Ondo has oil too. So all these little things, it does not take rocket science or going to Babalawo to know that when you are involved in running government, there are basic things, if you are made for it, there are basic things that will come to you naturally, and you must do.
The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, has facilitated the return of 13 Nigerian students that fled from the war in Sudan into Saudi Arabia to be back home. According to the agency, the students are scheduled to depart Jeddah today on board Qatar Airways and will arrive in Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, tomorrow. The return of the 13 Nigerian students from Saudi Arabia is part of the evacuation of stranded Nigerian citizens in the war-torn Sudan by the federal government through NEMA and other relevant agencies. The students had fled by using boats through the Red Sea into Saudi Arabia, where they sought the assistance of the federal government to be transported back home. Consequently, they were profiled by the Nigerian mission in Saudi Arabia, an arrangement for the safe return made by the NEMA in line with the mandates of the agency. It will be recalled that the federal government had recently evacuated a total of 2,518 stranded Nigerian citizens in Sudan who were airlifted from Port Sudan and Aswan in Egypt. On the foreign scene, Prince Harry, Meghan and Hamada have been involved in a near-catastrophic car chase involving paparazzi. A spokesperson for the prince said the incident happened after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex attended an awards ceremony in New York yesterday. In a statement, the prince's spokesperson said the relentless pursuit lasted for over 2 hours. They added that it resulted in near collisions with other drivers on the road, pedestrians and police officers. Prince Harry's mother, Princess Diana, was killed in a 1997 car crash in Paris while being chased by photographers. And in Africa, Kenyan officials have discovered 22 more bodies buried in the East African country's Shakahola forest, raising the death toll of a starvation cult to 201. On Friday, officials exhumed 29 bodies, including the remains of 12 children buried in the one grave. While briefing journalists, the regional commissioner, Rhoda Onyacha, said one more suspect was arrested, bringing a total to 26 people detained in connection with the Good News International Church.
10 more bodies have been recovered in the Kenya's coastal forest, where people are reported to have been made to starve to death after joining a doomsday cult. This brings the number of bodies recovered as the police continue investigating the deaths to 211. After a 2-day break, the exhumation process in the vast Shakahola forest continued on Tuesday. Of the new bodies found by the government's forensic team, 2 were children. 3 members of the religious cult were rescued in a critical condition after starving in the forest, and were taken to hospital for stabilization. Those reported missing at the treatment centers remain at 610. Paul Mackenzie, leader of the Good News International Church, was accused of ordering his followers to starve their children and themselves to death so they could go to heaven before the end of the world, which he predicted to be on April 15. The taxi driver turned preacher had earlier been denied bail by Kenyan court, while the Kenyan President William Ruto appointed a commission of inquiry into the deaths of people believed to have starved themselves to death, while a court ordered that the court's leader remain in prison. The commission of inquiry will examine whether administrative or intelligence lapses contributed to the deaths. Mackenzie has not commented publicly on the accusations against him, nor has he been required to enter a plea to any criminal charge. Mackenzie appeared in court in the port city of Mombasa last week, where prosecutors asked the judge to hold him for an additional 90 days as their investigation continued. Mackenzie was arrested on March 14 after police raided his church. Investigators are charging the pastor with radicalization and terrorism. The judge said he will deliver a ruling this Wednesday on the prosecution's request. Kenyan President William Ruto has said his government takes responsibility for the deaths of more than 200 members of the Christian court who starved themselves, admitting that state officers in Kilifi County failed to protect the followers of Good News International Church from starving to death. Postmortem examinations showed that some of the victims died of hunger, while others were killed by strangulation or suffocation, and some had injuries to the head. Temitope Ajijolaluola, Western Spring Television News.
New Zealand police have launched a homicide inquiry into a fire at an emergency housing hostel in Wellington, where at least 6 people were killed. Officials said up to 20 people were still missing, and they were treating the blaze as an act of arson. The fire had broken out at the 4-story Loafers Lodge hostel early yesterday, forcing residents to the rooftop and some to jump from windows. Due to damage, police have not yet been able to confirm the death toll. The 92-room hostel was known to house residents from the vulnerable and marginalized communities, including those on welfare and disability pensions, as well as workers from the city's main hospital.
We are treating it as an arson. I'm not prepared to say why or the reasons for us treating it as an arson, other than to say that we are. I can say, having seen some early photographs, that the damage is extensive. That in some of the floors, and on the 3rd floor in particular, the roof has collapsed, and that in places on the floor, a pile of debris and burnt debris is stacked as high as 1 metre.
Elsewhere, Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso dissolved the opposition-controlled National Assembly in a decree today, bringing forward legislative and presidential elections a day after he presented his defense in an impeachment process against him. Mr. Lasso denies accusations he turned a blind eye to alleged embezzlement related to a contract at state-owned oil transportation company, Flopec. The right-wing president can govern for up to 6 months by decree under the South American country's constitution. The National Electoral Council now has 7 days to call presidential and legislative elections, which must be held within 90 days. Those elected will finish the terms of Mr. Lasso and the lawmakers he removed, which had been set to end in May 2025. In the meantime, Turkey's President Recep Erdogan has promised his supporters a bigger victory when they return to the polls in 12 days' time in a runoff vote for the country's presidential election. Mr. Erdogan, who is seeking a 3rd term as president and a 5-year extension of his 20-year rule, has appeared in a buoyant mood since Sunday's parliamentary and presidential elections. The Turkish president must face a 2nd round against opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu on May 28th, as no candidate received more than 50% of the vote. Although he received 49.5% of the votes in the presidential race to Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's 44.9%, his party dropped votes from the 2018 elections. And still ahead, the International Monetary Fund says the appreciation of sub-Saharan African currencies against the United States dollar is pushing up against public debt stock. We have more on these and other business stories after this break. Please stay with us.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. Named Mao Zedong at birth, but globally known as Mao Zedong, he was a Chinese revolutionary and founder, People's Republic of China, which he led as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 until his death in 1976. He was a communist who believed in the attainment of power by the instrumentality of gun. His wise saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of gun," formed the major plank of his revolutionary struggle for the control of China. In the long span of his leadership and political power, Mao Zedong relentlessly entrenched the communist philosophy in China, which emphasized the revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploiting class and their state structures. The communist leaders defined the class struggle as people's war. Mao Zedong was a story of grass to grace, having risen from peasantry to preeminent status as China's most respected leader. Western Spring Television identifies Mao Zedong as a major character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 Naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
Welcome back. And now to business. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, says the depreciation of sub-Saharan African currencies against the United States dollar is pushing up public debt stock. In the Global Lenders' recent blog post, IMF said weaker currencies make the fight to curb inflation harder, given sub-Saharan Africa's dependence on imports. The Bretton Woods institution said countries in the region have recorded an average of 8% depreciation of their currencies since January 2022. The IMF, however, said the extent varies by country, adding that Ghana's CD and Syria loan depreciated by more than 45%. And implications, the IMF said when currencies weaken against the US dollar, local prices rise as much of what people buy, including essential items like food, are imported. The financial institution said more than 2/3 of imports are priced in US dollars for most countries in the region. In the United Kingdom, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has suggested that the default location for workers should be in the office unless there is a good reason to work from home. Speaking at the British Chambers of Commerce conference in London, the Chancellor said while working remotely had produced exciting opportunities, he was worried about the loss of creativity when it is permanent. Flexible working has become the norm for many workers in the UK since the pandemic, but there has been a split across different sectors since lockdown restrictions have been eased. Some firms told their staff they needed to return to the workplace, while others opted for so-called hybrid working patterns, where employees could come into offices on certain days and work remotely on others. Other businesses allowed workers to do their jobs from home on a permanent basis.
It gives lots of choices. If you have a disability, it gives you the chance, and you have a mobility issue. You're in a wheelchair. A decade ago, there was a presumption that you wouldn't be able to do lots of jobs, which we don't now need to have. On the other hand, there is nothing like sitting around a table, seeing people face to face, developing team spirit. And I worry about the loss of creativity when people are permanently working from home and not having those water cooler moments where they bounce ideas off each other. And not every great business idea happens in a structured formal meeting. And so I think that's why increasingly businesses are saying they want people back unless there's a reason. I think we will get to a point where the default is, with the exception of specific categories of work, like, for example, call center work. But I think the default will be you work in the office unless there's a good reason not to be in the office, and gradually we're getting there.
One of the world's biggest car makers has warned it may have to close UK factories if the government does not renegotiate the Brexit deal. Stellantis, which owns Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën and Fiat, had committed to making electric cars in the UK, but says that is under threat. It warned that it could face tariffs of 10% on exports to the European Union due to rules on where parts are sourced from. It is the first time a car firm has openly called on the government to renegotiate the terms of Brexit's trade deal. The UK government, however, said it was determined the country's car making will remain competitive. Business and Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch had a virtual meeting with senior executives from Stellantis today. And still talking business, Chief Executive of ChatGPT's OpenAI, Sam Altman, has told legislators in the United States that government regulation of artificial intelligence is critical because of the potential risk it poses to humanity. Mr. Altman used his appearance in front of a U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee to urge Congress to impose new rules on big tech, despite deep political divisions that for years have blocked legislation aimed at regulating the internet. He also proposed the formation of a U.S. or a global agency that would license the most powerful AI systems and have the authority to take that license away and ensure compliance with safety standards. Mr. Altman's San Francisco-based startup gained public attention after it released ChatGPT, a free chatbox tool that answers questions with some jobs.
Look, we have tried to be very clear about the magnitude of the risks here. I think jobs and employment and what we're all going to do with our time really matters. I agree that when we get to very powerful systems, the landscape will change. I think I'm just more optimistic that we are incredibly creative and we find new things to do with better tools, and that will keep happening. My worst fears are that we, the field, the technology, the industry, cause significant harm to the world. I think that could happen in a lot of different ways. It's why we started the company. It's a big part of why I'm here today and why we've been here in the past and we've been able to spend some time with you. I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong. And we want to be vocal about that. We want to work with the government to prevent that from happening. But we try to be very clear-eyed about what the downside case is and the work that we have to do to mitigate that. Thank you.
All right, welcome to sports. Chelsea striker Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is to return to the Gabon side a year after announcing his international retirement. The 33-year-old retired as his country's record goal scorer with 28 goals in 68 appearances in May 2022. In a post on Instagram, Aubameyang said the return was prompted by a meeting with the country's president, Ali Bongo Ondimba. Gabon are currently top their 2023 Africa Cup of Nations qualification group. They can seal their place at the tournament in Ivory Coast next January, with a game to spare when they host the Democratic Republic of Congo in June. Inter Milan president Steven Zhang has revealed that at the start of the season, only striker Romelu Lukaku believed that the Champions League final was possible for the Nerazzurri. Speaking to journalists, the Inter president reacted to the team booking their place in the final in Istanbul, noting that it had been the Belgian who first believed it could happen. Inter will face either of Manchester City or Real Madrid in the final of the Champions League.
It's special, but if you tell me we're going to arrive to the final of the Champions League, probably it's difficult for me to believe. The only person who told me at the beginning of the season was Lukaku, actually. He told me we're going to go to the final. Honestly, we all know these two teams are very strong and two strong clubs. But it's the same as nobody expect we come out from a very difficult group stage. So as long as we're in the final or we become a finalist, we are playing at the same level, and I'm sure whoever is a finalist will be an amazing team, and we just have to put our heads down and go there to play it.
Italy and Juventus captain Leonardo Bonucci says he will retire from football at the end of next season. The 36-year-old has won 8 Serie A titles over 2 spells at the Italian club and made his 500th appearance against Sevilla last week. He also has 120 international caps and was part of the Italy side that beat England to win Euro 2020 in July 2021. Bonucci, whose contract expires next season, began his career at Inter Milan in 2005, where he won his first Serie A title in the 2005-2006 season. To tennis, Novak Djokovic suffered his earliest exit at the Italian Open since 2013 when he was beaten by rising Danish star Holger Rune in the quarterfinals. The Serb top seed, who turns 36 next week, was beaten 6-2, 4-6, 6-2 by 20-year-old Rune on the Rome clay. Djokovic was bidding for his 7th title in the Italian capital as it prepares for the French Open on the 28th of May. Djokovic's preparations for the French Open have been disrupted by injury, having missed the recent Madrid Open with an elbow problem and returning to the court in Rome as he looked to build up form and fitness. 22-time Grand Slam champion will have the opportunity at Roland Garros to move clear of Rafael Nadal in terms of the most men's major titles of all time.
No, I stay humble, of course. I mean, I have a lot to achieve before I can. I don't think ever you can. You should always be humble, and I think I am. I hope so. I hope people see me this way. I'm a huge fighter on the court, and I leave everything when I play my matches. And I'm super proud that I was able to get the victory today. I had to fight hard and play my best tennis. And huge credit to Novak. I'm a big fan of him, as I said. He's a huge inspiration. So I wish him all the best.
The Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix has been called off this weekend because of major flooding in the region. Discussions today between local authorities and organizers of the race at Imola in Italy concluded that the event could not proceed safely. In addition, there was a desire not to dilute the efforts of emergency services dealing with problems across the area. Formula One said calling off the race was the right and responsible thing to do. President and Chief Executive Officer Stefano Domenicali said his thoughts and prayers were with the victims of the flooding and the families and communities affected. And away from sports, American actor Johnny Depp today hit back against years of negative press, telling the Cannes Film Festival that most of the stories about him were fantastically, horrifically written fiction. Speaking to journalists the day after the premiere of his new film, Jeanne du Barry, on the festival's opening night, he said he did not care about being boycotted by Hollywood. Depp lost his part in the Harry Potter spin-off Fantastic Beasts films after his ex-wife, Amber Heard, accused him of domestic abuse. He won a defamation trial against Heard last year, but lost a previous libel case in London.
It's not my tide that we're discussing. Did I feel boycotted by Hollywood? Well, I mean, you'd have to not have a pulse to feel at that point, to feel like, no, none of this is happening. This is actually just a kind of a weird joke. You've been asleep for 35 years. So just let the weirdness commence. Of course, you know, I mean, when you're asked to resign from a film you're doing because of something that is merely a bunch of kind of vowels and consonants floating in the air, yeah, you feel a bit boycotted. Do I feel boycotted now? No, not at all. But I don't feel boycotted by Hollywood because I don't think about it. I don't think about Hollywood. I don't have much further need for Hollywood myself. I don't know how you guys feel, but yeah, I think it's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves, but they can't because they must fall in line with the person in front of them. You want to live that kind of life, I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere, you know.
Well, and that's all at this hour. But before we go, here is a recap of our major stories. The doctors under the umbrella of the National Association of Resident Doctors, NARD, today commenced a 5-day warning strike over the federal government's failure to meet their demands. There was drama today at the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal sitting in Abuja today, adjourned to Friday, May 19th, for continuation of pre-hearing on a petition by presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, against the President-elect Bola Tinubu. President Muhammadu Buhari has condoled with the families of the 4 people killed by gunmen at Agbaru local government of Anambra State. And the foreign scene will tell you that Prince Harry, Meghan, and her mother have been involved in a near-catastrophic car chase involving paparazzi. Please do follow us on our social media handles at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanipe. Thank you so much for watching. Good evening.
Evelyn Ohiole,
Hi.
King Eve. How are you today?
I'm good, I'm fine, I'm alive.